So, disabled facilities grants. These were fundamentally brought into play in order to try to save money. So you might wonder, how on earth does a grant of so every man, woman and child in the UK has a right to up to £25,000 of means tested, I'll come back to that phrase, means tested funding, in order to pay for adaptations to enable them to continue to live an independent life within their home. So you might ask, why on earth does giving someone £25,000 worth of works save money? Well, if you're looking at the fact that everybody has a basic right to an independent and fulfilling life, and disabled people, in order to be able to lead what is often a less independent and fulfilling life, can require state support. If that can't be provided to people within their dwellings, then those people end up being housed within the care sector. So disabled people, if you're dealing with them in residential care, cost an awful lot to care for. Anything from £225 to £400 per day. So once this video is finished, I'd just like you to take a moment to work out, if it costs £400 per day for a high needs disabled person to be cared for, how much it costs the local authority in just 1 year to look after them. So this all falls ultimately on the public sector. Private residential care, particularly for the elderly, can be funded through the person's estate. So very often this is achieved through looking after, so for the people who are looking after that person, taking their house and selling it. So they then move them into a residential care facility, and they use the proceeds of the sale of the property in order to fund their care within that care facility. So again, using your calculation of £400 a day, or choose £300 if you want to be conservative about things, try and work out, based on a property price of, let's say, £150,000 when it's sold, how long that £150,000 is going to last. And then how much money they have to come up with per year as the family of the person being looked after if that person continues to live within that residential care and doesn't pass away. And so you can see that taking care of the disabled people, which are predominantly elderly people, bear in mind that the significant percentage of the UK population does suffer from some kind of disability. It's a massive use of the nation's resources. So what sort of things would you need to do to try to prevent this from being a problem? Well, the Environmental Health Department has a wonderful strand to the work in private housing, which is that they can go into the houses of disabled people with permission. They can use an occupational health person to carry out a needs assessment for the person in that property, and they produce a report, and that report says what sort of adaptations they need for their property in order to be able to go on living there independently and not to have to move out and require residential care. And so these often they have quite a long waiting list to access the occupational therapist, because there's not a very large number of the people in this profession. There's a real shortage. This can be circumvented somewhat by getting a private occupational therapist OT assessment done, and then saving the bill for it and putting that bill on the request for funding for the grant. So then the local housing authority surveyor, which is an environmental health officer or an environmental health practitioner, sometimes from a surveying background, visits the property and draws up the schedule of works. These schedule of works are very detailed and may involve anything from fitting a stair lift through to a whole extension on the ground floor of the property, to enable the person to live entirely on the ground floor of the property. Adaptations might include level access showers, wet rooms within the property, may include toilets which help the person sit down and stand up and clean them after they've used the loo, if they're struggling with that kind of thing. It may also involve whole rail systems which carry people from their bedroom into the bathroom for bathing, and then in hoists, and then onto the living room to deposit them on the sofa, where the Meals on Wheels service will come in and provide them with some breakfast, some lunch and some dinner. And so this funding is so the requirements are worked out by the occupational therapist. The surveyor, the environmental health officer or practitioner visits the property and draws up a schedule of work, and then this is very detailed with everything spec'd out for individual pricing, and then this is put out to a series of approved contractors who then submit 10 quotes to do the job based on the schedule of works laid out by the local authority environmental health officer. The applicant can get help with what is quite an extensive array of paperwork associated with these grants, with files up to about this sort of thickness. And these grants can take over a year to administer, from initial contact through to final works being marked off and payments being made. And so they can do that. They can help find the quotes. They can monitor work people at the property and just generally administer the process. And from this, they can take a 10% cut in the cost of the works as their fee. And that all gets put on the grant costs. There's £25,000, as I've said, means tested, which is provided. And this is means tested, meaning that if you've got a lot of money set aside, or you've got a strong pension or other income, then you will have to draw on that funding first. But when that fund is exhausted, then a percentage of that £25,000 will typically still be left over. So you make your application early, and then you record what you're spending out of your own money towards adaptations, and you can dip into that 25,000 sum repeatedly. So as you become more disabled and your mobility needs, so your mobility reduces, your needs increase, then you have to draw on further adaptations within the property. Then over a long period of time, you can repeatedly dip into that theoretical £25,000 pot. And ultimately, if you've got to make some contribution of your own because you've got lots of savings, when that becomes exhausted, the rest of the £25,000 will still be there. If you don't do this, then you spend all of your own money, and then you still got so you then have to dip into the 25,000 after. Usually the 25,000 is matched by another 25,000 that comes from the local housing authority. And this is because they can get a big cash bung, effectively, a grant from the public health body, local public health board, because this sort of work saves a substantial amount for local authority, for the NHS, vast efficiencies in trying to prevent people relying on residential care. So usually you've got a set of approved contractors. The local housing authority deals with any technical inquiries and then checks off works. So that is, in a nutshell, disabled facilities grants are for. And if you get into this area of work, it's wonderful, because you will always be very popular when you visit properties. Everyone will want to see you, and you will make an awful lot of people very happy, making a huge difference to their quality of life. So it's very rewarding.